To many buyers in China, the name on the AC is still Gree, and in several air conditioner categories, the company has led at home and internationally. But China's competition resets fast. Leaders of yesterday aren't guaranteed tomorrow. Over the last decade, Gree's position has gradually eroded as rivals scaled up, channels shifted, and pricing tightened. Here is the plan. We'll unpack the business model, trace the evolution of the financials, and ask whether, despite market share losses, the stock is still worth a look today. Gree's story starts in Zhuhai with a highly cooling workshop in 1989. It was reorganized as Gree Electric Appliances in 1994 and went public in Shenzhen in November 1996. Under Dong Mingzhu, who became chair in 2012, the group pushed beyond room AC. In 2015, it launched Gree Intelligent Equipment to move into industrial robots, and a bold 2016 bid to buy EV maker Inlong was later dropped after shareholders objected. In 2018, Gree added the King Home fridge brand. Then, in 2019-2020, the Zhuhai City shareholder sold 15% to Zhuhai Mingjun. And, after the transfer was registered in January 2020, Gree declared it had no controlling shareholder. In August 2021, the registered address shifted to Hengqin New Area, and by late 2024, Gree was touting in-house chips and new SiC project. Gree sells mostly HVAC-led consumer appliances, chiefly residential air conditioners, which made up approximately 78.5% of 2024 revenue. A second, smaller pillar is industrial products and green energy at 9.1%. Smart device is tiny and other main business is 1.8%. The remaining 10.3% is reported as other business, primarily Gree's Jiagong consigned supply activity, where Gree Centrali buys raw materials, steel, plastics, copper, and resells them to upstream component suppliers. In 2024, Gree still makes most of its money at home. Within the main business, 74.8% of revenue came from China and 14.9% from exports. A further 10.3% sits in other business, a non-core bucket that runs at very low margins, 2% growth. So the real engine remains appliances and HVAC. On positioning, the brand remains formidable. Euromonitor ranks Gree number 1 worldwide by retail volume in split air conditioners in 2024. And in China, it leads central air conditioning for the 13th consecutive year with a market share above 15%. At the same time, the competitive heat in China has been rising for a decade. On an apples-to-apples measure, Gree's share in residential AC slipped from 42.7% in 2016 to 37.4% in 2021 and 33.9% in 2022. Management doesn't publish a like-for-like 2023-2024 domestic share, but two disclosed proxies show continued pressure. Domestic unit sales were 29.8 million in 2023, scale still huge, while the online retail share, tracked by AVC, eased from 28.1% in 2023 to 25.4% in 2024. Both still number 1. Put simply, leader in key AC niches, but a slow erosion in China's mass residential market over the last decade. Exactly the dynamic we'll test against the business model and the financials next. On the revenue chart, the line tells a simple story. A fast climb from 2015 to 2018, then a long plateau interrupted by the 2020 dip, and only a modest rebound into 2024. Early growth was fueled by a hot domestic real estate cycle and an upgrade replacement wave that pulled forward demand for residential AC. Management explicitly linked the pre-2018 surge to property strength and consumption upgrades. From 2019 onward, the drivers flipped. China's project market softened with a property adjustment, which hit central AC in particular, and competition intensified in residential. Latest read, H1 2025, consolidated revenue was 97.3 billion RMB, minus 2.5% year-on-year. On today's EV to revenue, we are sitting around 0.97x, basically a mid-pack print for large HVAC appliance names. Not stretched, not distressed. What's important to understand here is that Gree's share erosion wasn't about product capability. It was mostly where and how the units were sold. As China's AC market moved online, a brand anchored in powerful offline dealers and a premium price mix adapted later than peers to promo-heavy entry-tier volumes. Competitors, Midea, Hisense-TCL, pressed e-commerce and subsidies harder and captured units. Products retained leadership in key niches, but the premium SKU and delayed online pivot meant share edged down even as profitability proved more resilient than low-end players. Despite the share losses we just covered, Gree kept and even lifted its profitability. The EBITDA curve shows it plainly. Using 2016 as a clean base, 2015 was unusually soft for China AC with lower plant utilization and heavier promotion that depressed EBITDA. The margin rises from 17.8% in 2016 to 22.3% in 2024. And that flows through to the EPS chart. Earnings rise from about 2.1 RMB in 2015 to 4.36 in 2018, slip through 2019-2020 to 3.71, then rebuild steadily to a new high of 5.83 in 2024, matching the margin recovery even as sales flattened. The rebuild is classic mix and cost, more inverter premium, tighter expense control, and input relief after 2021. On the interim read, H1 2025 basic EPS was 2.6 RMB, slightly above 2.56 a year earlier. On the engineering side, R&D has held around 3 to 4% of sales, enough to support inverter efficiency and central AC. One reasons margins and EPS rebuilt, even as units shifted online. What keeps earnings from cracking is how Gree builds and services the product. Deep in-house control of the critical bits, compressors at Lenda, motors at Kaibang, control electronics, and a nationwide install after-sales backbone. That stack stabilizes unit costs and reliability, which is why margins and EPS rebuild even as unit share narrowed. On the assets chart, PPE per share climbs from 2.6 CNY in 2015 to 6.6 CNY in 2024, with a clear step up in 2021. That isn't just more capacity, it's better capacity, automation and smart factory upgrades, compliance with higher inverter efficiency standards, a heavier central AC VRF mix, more capital intensive, and deeper in-house component integration. Net effect: more assets per share to lock in unit costs and quality, even while revenue stayed flat. In parallel, market cap to tangible equity moved from 3 to 4x in the late 20s to about 1.8x today. The low end of the decade range, not a demanding mark if return on equity free cash flow hold. The balance sheet is clean. Gree stayed net cash across 2015-2024. The post-2020 rise in borrowings looks tactical. Short-term lines to smooth working capital and bridge factory upgrades, share buybacks, while cash consistently exceeded debt, so leverage risk is minimal. The capex chart tells a tighter story. A commissioning peak in 2022, then a quick step down to 1.7% of revenue in 2024, the low of the series. That pattern points to a project cycle finishing and spend reverting to maintenance optimization. With sales flat, expansion is being kept tight. Return on equity fell in 2020-2022 on margin compression and softer utilization, pandemic property drag. Then rebounded as cost eased, mix improved and capex normalized, leaving 2024 back near highs at a very strong level. Free cash flow is choppy, negative in 2021, a sharp jump in 2023, 51 billion, then a normalization in 2024, 26 billion. The 2023 spike came from a working capital release, faster collections, receivables down, lower inventories, and higher payables lifted operating cash flow to 56.4 billion. With projects rolling off and capex dropping to 1.7% of revenue in 2024, free cash flow settled back. At today's price to free cash flow of roughly 8.6x, that's not expensive by sector standards for a scaled HVAC appliances name. Shareholder returns have been consistently generous, aside from 2017 when the dividend was kept to conserve cash for factory upgrades and diversification. Based on the 2024 payout, 2 CNY final plus 1 CNY interim, the yield at today's price is about 7.5% for a 51% payout, unusually rich for this space. On buybacks, the share count has edged down in recent years, but there's no disclosed 2025 program size yet, so we cannot judge its materiality versus market cap. The regression chart says it all. A long run-up as the business scaled and took leadership in AC, then a flat sideways price since early 2022 that mirrors share erosion and plateauing revenue. On valuation, at today's price, approximately 40 CNY, we are at 6.9x on 2024 EPS. Replacing H1 2024 with H1 2025 gives an LTM EPS of 5.87 and a 6.8x print. That's deep value for this space, and mostly reflects the market's doubt that Gree can re-accelerate growth. Gree is above all an HVAC operator. Big-scale manufacturing, reliable installs, and a service backbone that keeps units running. The brand still carries weight with consumers and project buyers. Vertical control of key components helps on quality and supply. Engineering depth keeps efficiency standards on track, and nationwide after-sales coverage is a real moat in a category where service matters. The flip side is not financial, it's competitive structure. China's online channels reward price aggression and fast promotions. Brand premiums are harder to defend. Project demand is patchier post-property downturn, and export routes face policy and trade noise. Leadership remains, but the field moves fast. If Gree can simply hold share from here, even with little or no growth, the current pricing looks undemanding. About 6.8x PE, a 7.5% dividend yield on a 51% payout. Put differently, if the company pay out 100% of earnings, the implied yield will be 15%. A striking number for a mature HVAC franchise. Thanks for watching this deep dive until the end. If you found it useful, feel free to like, subscribe, and share. And if you want to learn more about one of its main competitors, check out my video on Midea.